Long, long ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there were stories in which the main characters were essential. But then, one man changed this, and this video is his story. And I mean, where do we even start? Jar Jar Binks is the worst thing to happen to cinema since Transformers 2. So I think the best way to start this is how they start all great movies, on low, flat, boring angles. I mean, from the beginning. Alright, so before we get into this Jar Jar crap, I want you to watch the following scene. And let me know if it's interesting, because I'm gonna be right back, because I gotta go get some of my pizza rolls. Okay? Alright, I'm back. Did I miss anything interesting? Yep, didn't think so. There's just more cutting up. I mean, look how easy they just cut through these droids. I mean, it's like cutting through butter with a steak knife. Now keeping that in mind, watch this next scene. Wait, is that him running? Shouldn't he be, doing some of this right now? Doesn't it seem a little odd to you, considering that entire scene is completely out of context? Well, for continuity's sake, let's have a look at another scene. Is this another Jedi running from the droids? I mean, look how easily Qui-Gon just takes care of it in like 2 seconds. You have to see Obi-Wan running like a little girl away from them. And then this guy appears. And we'll touch on him next. Anyways, back on the subject. I have no idea why these Jedi are running. And I know what you're thinking. Oh yeah, it's probably because they wanted to add some tension to the movie. But that's not true. I mean, they show these droids as something extremely easily killed. But then they show the Jedi running from them? It just doesn't make sense. One of the biggest, most glaring problems of the movie is that we kind of just don't really care what's going on. There's no threat to any of the Jedi or anybody who's involved. But let's get down to business. Part 1. Stupid Gungans. From the very first scene in which we meet Jar Jar is when things start to go horribly wrong, and Star Wars could never be saved. We see all these guys and Qui-Gon running from all the stampeding little things, and then Jar Jar's kind of just like, what's going on? And then Qui-Gon has to tackle him to the ground to save him from, death. This is when Jar Jar should have been dropped at the very first opportunity. But then he kind of decides just to get up and follows along. I mean, this is when Qui-Gon should have just punched him in the mouth with his lightsaber. I would have been okay with it. C-3PO was a much better character, overall, I'd say. Except that he was a robot. Anyway, then Qui-Gon shows up, and, they start to run away like they should have 5 minutes ago. But then Jar Jar says,
"Excuse me, but the most safest place would be Gunga City. It's where I grew up. 'Tis a hidden city."
Then the unthinkable happens. Qui-Gon just turns around and he's just like, "Oh, a city. That sounds useful." And then the entire audience goes, "Ah!" Then Jar Jar says,
"My friend might have been banished."
Then something completely out of context happens again. The Jedis then follow up to that comment with the following.
"That is the sound of 1,000 terrible things heading this way.
If they find us, they will crush us, grind us into tiny pieces, and blast us into oblivion."
Doesn't that sound a little evil and malicious to you? What kind of Jedi are these? You've even got a guy in the back there that looks like one of the Hanar from Mass Effect 2. The most peaceful civilization in the galaxy, and Jedi are essentially the same. I mean, look at these guys, sitting around praying. Samuel L. Jackson can even calm himself down to play the role of Mace Windu. Anywho, Jar Jar then says,
"I've forgotten. The bosses would do terrible things to me. Terrible things to me if me going back there."
But Qui-Gon's just like, meh, don't really care. It's not like I'm a Jedi or anything, or how to protect galactic civilizations. Part 2. Welcome to Gunga. So anyway, Jar Jar leads them to the swamp or whatever, and then he's just like, "Alright, I'm gonna come down in with you, even though, I got banished, and they'll do bad things, but I'm still gonna jump in the water." Even though you should have said something like, alright, well, I'm banished, so I'm just gonna stay up here, just swim down the giant city, can't miss it. It kinda looks like this. It's got big lights, kinda looks like Rapture from BioShock. You know, can't miss it. It's a big place. But instead, he jumps in the water, screaming while he does it. And Jedi put in the breathalyzers. Off we go, into Rapture. All this I've been talking about leads up to my major first point about Jar Jar. He really doesn't fit into the story. Everything I've said so far kind of leads to the fact that he doesn't really have any logical reasoning behind being here. He should have turned back, 5 minutes ago before he jumped in the water. Anyways, this is kind of just one of the examples of, how much he just doesn't fit into the movie. To be honest with you, I'm just not sure why he's here, or why he gets away with being there, or being in that dumb little city, or why the guys in the Gunga place didn't banish him earlier. I know I would have kicked him out, 5 years after birth if he did this kind of crap all the time. So anyways, now we're in the big Rapture City, and Qui-Gon convinces the Gungan leaders to give him a bongo. No, not a bongo from Donkey Kong, but a transportation device. And then he says something or other about rescuing Jar Jar for no reason, because
he seemed to be punished.
So, because of this, Qui-Gon goes to Obi-Wan and he says,
We need a navigator to get us through the planet's core. This Gungan may be of help.
Even though later, Jar Jar says,
Where is it going?
So, they kind of just took along Jar Jar anyways, and he never really did what he was brought along to do. But you kind of just come to expect these things when you're watching these films, considering nothing so far has made a lick of sense. And then, Jar Jar tells the most interesting story.
You'd say, boom the gasser, then crash into Bus's hay blibber, then vanished.
So what I'm getting here is saying boom to Gersser leads to crushing the boss's herd bladder, which then equals to banishment. Cool story. I hope the giant fish eats you and you die. Eventually, they make it out of the planet core or whatever, and they submerge in the middle of daylight, deactivate the shield, and then they go to save Queen Amidala or whatever. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention during the movie. I mean, these scenes are probably also the best parts of the movie, because we don't really see Jar Jar very much anymore. We see him fall here, and then he steps in the poopy on Tatooine. Wait, is that C-3PO? In the corner of your screen? Kinda just chilling? I mean, what's he doing there? That's weird. And then he gets his tongue caught in the power converter that Anakin told him not to get his tongue caught in. And then comes one of the dumbest scenes in all of Star Wars history. You can see Jar Jar kind of having a freak out there. Then they start to walk along, just cruising by like a couple of villains. And then Jar Jar sees something to eat. And he goes, I'm gonna steal it. And then he kind of gets his tongue stuck, and the bartender's like, hey, you gotta pay for that? And Jar Jar's just like, nope. And then he gets jumped by this little suburban guy and almost dies. But then he says the most boldest statement.
But Misa doing nothing.
If you really did nothing, the guy would have been mad at you, and you wouldn't have had the thing in your mouth, and then you wouldn't have, spat it out of your mouth, and then you wouldn't have got jumped by the little guy, and then Qui-Gon wouldn't have had to save you. But it's okay, because you didn't do anything wrong, right? And then we get to the big dumb pod race, and you can see how supportive Jar Jar is, because he says,
Don't be messy, we not watching.
Anyways, my point is, it's undeniable that the way you've seen, Jar Jar has no logical place in the movie. But, he makes us laugh sometimes, so he must be comic relief. My problem with this is two things. One, how illogical some of the scenes are in the movie, and two, how poorly written most of the scenes in the movie actually are.